It's a humid Sunday afternoon in Fairhope, Alabama, my hometown, March 2022. And I've just flown into town with my partner Dan after we've learned that my dear Aunt Cynthia, my mother's older sister, has esophagus cancer and has very little time left to live. Cynthia has always been this radiant spiritual presence in my life. She's known as the walking woman of Fairhope because of the hours that she spends walking beside Mobile Bay and on Fairhope Pier. She smiles at everyone, this tall, long-legged brunette who considers God to be love and nature to be the ultimate transcendence, even though she was raised as a strict Catholic. So I've always identified with her. She's been a performer, a social justice fighter, and I can't believe that my very young-seeming 75-year-old aunt is at the end of her life. As soon as I told Dan, he immediately said, "Let's go. She's important to you. She's important to me." And it just feels like the greatest gift to see them hugging, connecting. He even performs for her because he has a little song and dance himself. And at the end of our time in Alabama, he says to me, "I feel loved by your family the way that I feel loved by mine. Every time we visit your family here, I fall more in love with you." We leave to go back to Austin. And it's really hard to say goodbye to her, knowing that I'll come back and visit. But the fact that I have someone to accompany me on this journey who I've defined as my person is the most grounding and stabilizing thing. I am an only child, born to older parents. I've moved once every couple of years as an adult, seeking adventure. But now that I'm reaching my mid-30s and through the pandemic, feeling a deep need for continuity that I just don't have. I see it in the generation before me, but then I see them get older and it gets really scary. So I'm just at this moment where I'm ready and I see us and our future creating a family together. And Dan is this tall, handsome therapist with big blue eyes. He seems to understand me and be honest with me more than anyone that I've ever been with. Go figure, he's a therapist, right? Everyone needs one. But we have this deep, affectionate connection because he also is an only child, born to older parents. He gets what it is to feel like, I don't know, time slipping away in the older generation. We cuddle for hours. He's so sweet. I'm committed, unlike I've ever felt before. So much so that I'm willing to accept a couple of big challenges. But I know Cynthia always had hope in her relationships. I have to have hope. First, Dan struggles with depression. Sometimes he'll wake up in the morning on a Sunday and not want to do anything at all, which is very hard for me, a very active person. So I end up staying at home with him and get low myself, but I'm committed. I know that we can overcome something together. It's like all about our love. And the second issue is harder for me to wrap my mind around and to come to terms with, and it's sex. Throughout our relationship, Dan is way less interested in sex than I am, which is very strange and an experience that I've not ever had. It seems that he just needs to get more in touch with his physical self. I have him do yoga with me, encourage him to exercise more. We talk about seeing a couples therapist. And he is hopeful, so I'm hopeful. And nothing feels worth ruining what we have together. In fact, I even glimpse a wedding ring on his phone, like a photo of a wedding ring on his phone. We've talked about children. So I'm committed amidst these challenges. But then it gets harder. And Dan, his fears grow about the future. You see, he's been trying to make the full move from DC to Austin for a few months now because I moved again, had been in DC, moved back to Austin. And April 1st, he's committed, he's coming. We're driving his car down with all of his things, and it'll be permanent. But we get an hour outside of the city, and he has a panic attack, is crying, says very little, and turns around the car. I'm stunned. But immediately he says, "Oh, I regret this. It was nerves." He buys us flights the next day to Austin, promises he'll get the car and his things down somehow. And for those next couple of weeks, we actually start seeing a couples therapist. It's like everything is magical for this short time. We're having lots of sex. He's telling me how much he wants to be with me, even though I still now am uncertain. Can I trust this person? Then Dan slides into one of his depressions. But this time it's so bad, it's impenetrable. And I don't understand what's going on. And it's even harder because I learned that Cynthia is in her last weeks, even days, and still carrying around such hope. So this time, I leave Dan in Austin, and I fly to Alabama alone, afraid to walk in the door of my aunt's house, knowing that these will be the last few days that I get to spend with her. But when I walk in, and her hospital bed is in the living room, she is just beaming with positivity, and she's this beacon of wisdom somehow. She has flowers all around her camellia garden out back, and she even brags about how she's gotten help to go use her outdoor shower so she can take in the sun and get wet at the same time. And she shares all this wisdom. She likes to quote this poem, which she kind of restates herself, and she acts it out as she's lying there, as like a handful of women in her family are there around her. She says, "Hold your lamp of courage high and wrap your fears in hope." And she says, "Don't wait to let people that you love know that you love them." She's just speaking one piece of wisdom after the next. But then, to me privately, she says, "Meredith, love everyone, but don't forget, you can't change a person." Which she had learned because she was married 4 times, but that, I wasn't supposed to say that, but that's okay. But she loved all of her husbands. Anyway, she's wise, she's strong, and I'm listening to her. And then I have to tell her goodbye. And I know that it is the last time I'm ever going to see her. And she makes it very clear that when the wind blows on our left or right cheek, that's her. And that the turtle is her spirit animal. So when I look out in Lady Bird Lake, those are her. She leaves me with so much, but I still have to let her go. And I go back to Austin, and Dan is still in a funk. And then Cynthia dies. She lets go of life so gracefully. 2 days later, Dan pulls me aside and he says, "I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy." And at first, I feel abandoned. I feel this rage, like, how could you do this to me in this moment? And then he says, "I have to share something more with you." He says, "I'm questioning my sexuality." And then he says he's been questioning it for at least the past year, but that he's been too afraid to face himself as a 32-year-old therapist, and he's been way too afraid to share it with me. And I'm kind of blown away, but I know that he has to be who he is. It just makes me sad that it's taken him this long to face himself. And so that day, he packs his things and he leaves. And he doesn't speak to me after walking out that door. It does feel like 2 deaths happen in a period of 3 days. June 3rd, 2022, I lose Cynthia. June 5th, 2022, I lose Dan. And I know that I have to let go of 2 people and of a life that I had envisioned for myself. But as hard as I know that it'll be, I keep in my mind an image of Cynthia lying there with her smile, saying, "Hold your lamp of courage high and wrap your fears in hope."